strong language. If you think you may be offended, switch off now.
This is a public service announcement. Go!
In new music we trust on BBC Radio 1.
In new music we trust on BBC Radio 1.
Trust us to bring you the best new music
from across the UK and from around the world.
Ladies and gentlemen.
This morning from 5 a.m, Rob da Bank.
This is Rob da Bank playing a random sprinkling of noise.
Now, over on BBC Radio 1 Extra.
The hip-hop continues with Charlie Sloth.
The hardest hip-hop out there right now.
In new music we trust.
On BBC Radio 1.
Stop.
Now.
Let's go.
Essential.
Pete Tong.
The world's best DJs.
Hey, what's happening? This is Cascade.
Hey, this is Derek Prince.
It sees everything.
My Jane Coles, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm Jamie XX.
Essential mix.
The world's favourite mix show.
Raise your hands in the air. Let's do a mic check. Make some noise!
This is Radio 1's Essential Mix.
Many thanks to Kutski. I'm Pete Tong, welcoming you to a brand new year of Essential Mixes here on BBC Radio 1. If you're listening to this show for the first time, this is where we showcase the hottest talent from the world of electronic music. We hand over the turntables and 2 hallowed hours here on BBC Radio 1 to one of the hottest DJs or producers on the planet. We feel it is the best way for them to represent what they're all about. And we're going to kick off 2012 with one of the most exciting young British artists of the moment. He runs one of the hottest labels and club nights in the land, Night Slugs, along with his mate Bok Bok. His sound references grime, Baltimore, UK funky, R&B and Chicago house, and is definitely heavy on the bass. And his sensational debut album, Neon Dreams, came out towards the end of last year and features co-productions with Julio Bashmore. And that name? Here's the man himself to explain.
Yo, what's up? This is L-Vis 1990 of Night Slugs and PMR Records London. The name L-Vis 1990 comes from the late 80s band called Zig Zig Sputnik. In the intro to one of their tracks, 21st Century Boy, they described the ultimate band which is going to change the future by revisiting the past. That band was called L-Vis 1990. The idea of changing the future by revisiting the past was something that I really stuck to when I was writing Neon Dreams, and it's something that I bring forward in this Essential Mix as well. The basis of this mix for me was really about mixing classics from the likes of Marcel Detman, Carl Craig, Green Velvet, Laurent Garnier and Paul Woolford, and mixing it with new stuff from my label Night Slugs and other new producers around right now. There's been so much emphasis over the last couple of years, especially in my scene, on the new and what's fresh and what's happening right now, but I want that idea of timelessness really to come back. It doesn't matter when it was from. It could be from 2 years ago, it could be from 20 years ago, as long as it kind of fits in the vibe. So I hope you enjoy it. I've been L-Vis 1990. Take it easy.
Essential.
So please welcome hot and fresh for 2012, James Connolly, a.k.a. L-Vis 1990.
We just touched down in Neverland, and hoping that we never land, standing the test of time, always relevant, never irrelevant. We are constant, we are immortals, we are eternal. The second the DJ spins the record, the moment the needle touches the wax, we never relax. We are always moving. We are always shaking. We are timeless. This is the sound of your neon dreams. You're listening to L-Vis 1990's Essential Mix on BBC Radio 1. Night Slugs in the house.